Okay. Okay. Good morning. We're on the very bottom of 89B. We continue to discuss the rules of laborers, including what we're going to discuss today is the laboring ox that you're not allowed to muzzle so that he can eat while he works. Tana Rabbanan. Peros hamirchasos b'tfua. Paros. Paros hamirachsos b'tfua. Cows that are working in their working in a grain field. Vadashos b'truma u'maser, or they're threshing truma or maser. Eno over mishum bal tasom. You're allowed to muzzle them, right? Aval mipnei marisa ayin maybe bull may also but it doesn't look right, right? Like, so you're not allowed to muzzle. So you can muzzle oxen when they are threshing truma maser, and we have that from a pasuk that's derived from a pasuk. But it doesn't look right. So what you do is you bring like you hang a bag over their, I guess, over their mouths with some meoso from the same. If they're working with wheat, then you put some wheat in the bag. Of a total of a truscaline shabapia, and put it in a feed bag tied to her head so that she can eat. So it doesn't look as bad. It doesn't look like you're depriving the ox of food, of being able to eat because it's eating from the bag, but at the same time, you're protecting what you want to protect. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, maybe karshinim v'tolala, you bring karshinim. Karshinim translates here as vetch, I don't know, some kind of grain, and put that in the bag, rather than the type of grain that it's working in. Karshinim yafos because that's the best thing for it. Okay, karshinim are the best thing for it. And we'll see later if it means the preferred by the cow or the healthiest for the cow. Or minhu. Now we have a question on this. Paras hamaraxos betua, same case. Eno over mishum bal tachsom. You don't have to refrain from muzzling them. Vadoshos betruma master over mishum bal tachsom. This brisa says that you do have to let them eat, right? That you can't muzzle them in truma and maser, even in truma and maser. So that's we're going to go on with the brisa, but that's an obvious direct challenge to our brisa. V'nachri hadash b'parasa shel Yisrael. What if a non-Jew is using your ox to thresh? You don't have to worry about that. If he muzzles the ox, that's okay. The Yisrael Hadash b'Parasol shall Nachri over Mishum Bal Tafsam. But if you are threshing with a non-Jew's ox, you do have to let it graze. You can't muzzle it. Kasha truma truma, kasha maser maser. So this brisa specified both truma and maser. Excuse me. Over Mishum Bal Tafsam, and our brisa, the earlier brisa said you're not over. Mishlama truma truma lokasha. So I can answer the truma question. Kan betruma, kan begidule truma. Right? Maybe one brisa is talking about actual truma, and one is talking about where you took truma produce and used it to plant more, to plant in the ground, and then it sprouts. So that's gidule truma, something that grew from truma. So you could see where there's a distinction where you can truma is like closer to the source, if you will, or it's that if we're learning it from a pasuk, that's what's specified by the pasuk, that it's excluded from lo tachsom, but something that you planted from truma and then grew, that's not covered, and that is, you are subject to lo tachsom. El maser maser kasha, but how can you distinguish the cases of maser? Because there's no 1 second. So the Gemara is assuming we're talking about Master Sheni, right? If we're talking about Master Sheni, then what do you mean it's planted from Master Sheni? It has no there would be no master status to it at all. And if you want to say that that it's not a problem because kam maser kam begidule maser, answer the same thing about truma, that the one case is talking about gidule maser, that it was grown from maser, right? Bishlam begidule truma I understand that answer when it comes to Truma. Like Gidule Maser Chulin, but Gidule Maser has no Maser status whatsoever, right? Truma has some kind of this residual status if you plant it, but if you plant Maser, it has no residual status. It's not Maser at all. It's not connected to Maser at all. It's not. How do I know that? We have a Mishnah, Gidule Tevel, Gidule Maser Sheni Chulin. The Mishnah says specifically that if you plant something that's tavo, means you're not you're
Gedule tevel.
yeah, if it's gedule tavo, it has no, it's chulin, and gedule master is chulin. So el lakasha. So how can we answer the contradiction between the two brises about maser, about whether it's subject to some have maser rishon, have maser sheni? We're talking about two different kinds of maser, right? Maser rishon, what you get to the Levi; maser sheni, what you have to take with you to Yerushalayim. So which is which? So when you can't, that which you cannot, where you're not allowed to muzzle the animal, that's maser rishon, but maser sheni doesn't apply. Vibai Sema, or you can answer Hava Hava Master Sheni. Maybe they're both talking about Master Sheni V'Lakasha. How do you answer the contradiction? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. There's two opinions. The two prices are simply reflecting two different opinions. Whether Lo Tachsom applies. Rabbi Meir Diyamar Master Maman Gavo. Who Rabbi Meir says that Master Sheni is it really belongs, as it were, to God, and you're just licensed to take it to Yerushalayim and eat it. So in that case, the Lo Tachsom wouldn't apply. Rabbi Yehuda Diyamar Master Sheni Maman had Yotu. But if it's yours, if Master Sheni is yours, and you're just restricted in how you can use it, then Lo Tachsom would apply. So Gemara says, okay, wait a minute. Hey, Chidami, how are we talking about like threshing and maser? Kigon shehikdimo b'shibolin. How can that happen? Like maser, isn't maser usually after it is harvested? So and after it's harvested and after it's like brought into the house, so it's already been threshed. So kanshikdimo b'shibolin. It can happen where you separate the maser early, right? When before the threshing, you've separated the maser, which isn't really the proper way to do it, but it's still effective. Well, Rabbi Yehuda,
Is that Gemar Malachto?
is that
We were talking about earlier Gemar Malachto. Before Gemar Malachto, he can take it, right?
Yeah, but there we were
animal.
talking about.
This is not yet Gemar Malachto.
We weren't talking about Lo Tachsom yesterday, right? Weren't we talking about what were we talking about yesterday?
The worker, the worker can eat it. So
right.
This is saying the similar is the animal is eating it.
But we haven't encountered that concept when it comes to Lo Tachsom, right? In fact, it wouldn't make sense because like animals work, they I mean, I've never heard of that applied to Lo Tachsom. It seems like it's a general thing. Wherever the animal is working, you have to let it graze, whether it's still in the field, if the work is I don't see that we've ever seen that Gemar Malachto applies to Lo Tachsom.
Okay, I'm thinking it was sort of a continuation of the Mishnah we were learning, right?
Okay, but it seems like they're two different mitzvahs with two different parameters. As far as I know, I haven't seen that anywhere that it applies.
All right.
Okay, well, Rabbi Yehuda. Well, wait a minute. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Choma, right? That like, what are you saying? That that like you're allowing the cow to eat this outside of like you're saying there's no problem with unmuzzling the cow, with allowing the cow to graze, but how can you allow the cow to eat the Maser Sheni outside Yerushalayim? It needs to be eaten b'choma inside the walls. Our answer is Kigon Shadash Lifnim Mechomas Beis Pagi. We're talking about it's inside Yerushalayim. There was a threshing floor where you could where was inside Yerushalayim, so qualified for Maser Sheni. If you buy same Kasha, or you could say Kama Maser Vade, Kama Maser Demai. It might be. Or talking, the difference is if it's Maser Sheni for sure, you certainly have to eat in Yerushalayim. But if you're unsure if it was already, maybe Maser was taken from this already, maybe not, then then there would be a you would have to allow the cow to graze. The lo tachsam would apply, even though it's master sheni, but it's only doubtful master sheni. Now that you've resolved a contradiction that way, truma, you could also use the same answer for truma. Kama trumas vadai, kama trumas demai. You could be talking about the difference between certain truma and questionable truma. But the Gemara says, "Bishlam master demai ika." So there's such a thing as demai for master. Yellow trumas demai mi ika. There's such a thing as demai for truma. Vatanya afu bitelos havidoy v'gazer ala demai. He, referring to Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he said, you don't do the Maser Sheni declaration, right? The reading of the of Arami Ovilavi. He abolished that and said, since you couldn't, since in his time the Levium were no longer qualified for Maser by the decree of Ezra. So you couldn't say biarti hakodesh min habayis v'liam satev mimenu ger le'osom Levi. You couldn't say that you gave it to Levi because you weren't giving it to the Levi anymore. So he said, let's not do Master Sheni at all anymore. Let's give it all to the Levi, to the Kohanim, I mean. So anyway, Vigaz are but he also that's not relevant to us, but he said about Demai the following: he sent messengers or agents throughout Israel. He saw that people would only separate truma and not the masros. So there's no. So if that's the case, then there's no demai, that the master hasn't been separated. El Lakasha, so the way we can answer it is Kam B'Trumas Maser Vadai, Kam B'Trumas Maser Demai. So you can only say that about Maser, but not about Truma. Okay. They asked Rav Sheshes, Haiso Chelas Umatrezas Mahu. What if the animal has diarrhea, right? So it's ill, it's got some kind of intestinal problem, and it's eating. So eating more will just make the symptoms worse, right? So can you then muzzle it? So here's the investigation. Mishum demali lahu. Is it because it's for the health of the animal? The holomalila. This eating more grain while you have an intestinal problem is not healthy. So you should muzzle it. Or dilma dechasya umitsara. Maybe it's because of the mental distress of the animal that it's working in the field of working among all this food and it can't eat anything. So the animal presumably doesn't understand the link between eating and its intestinal problems. So it sees, and it's not able to eat, so it feels badly. So if the reason for it is the animal doesn't, feels oppressed, feels badly, then you should still allow it to graze, even though it's not healthy. We have a brisa about it. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Mevi Kashinin V'Tolala. We saw before that Rabbi Shimon says that if you have a situation where you need to provide food for the animal, but you don't want it to, and you're allowed to not let it graze. So we said Mishum Ma'asayin, you hang a bag of food from its head. For it to eat from. And Rabbi Shimon says, what should you put in there? Not the kind of grain that it's working with, but kashinin. So shakashinin yafos laminakol. And he said the reason is that kashinim is the best for it. Sounds like it means it's the healthiest for it. Shmamina mishum demali lahu, because it's healthy. Shmamina. So the Gemara accepts that as a excuse me. That was a good proof that it is for the health of the animal that you have to look out for. Like, in other words, this is a case where it makes a difference, where you understand what is the reason for the mitzvah. The Tama mitzvah is for the health of the animal, and so if it's not healthy, then you can muzzle it. They ask the following: Can you say to a non-Jew, go and thresh with my cow, and you can muzzle it, right? So that's going to save me money on my crop, right? The cow won't be eating it, but I'm not doing it; it's the non-Jew doing it. Miamrina, do we say Kiamrina Mir Lanachri Shavus when we say that telling a non-Jew to do something for you that is forbidden, that itself is a rabbinic prohibition. Maybe that only applies to Shabbos. So the whole Masechus Shabbos is shot through with all these things that are shvus, and including Amir Lanachri, right? You can't do that when it comes to Easter Shabbos, but maybe that's because Shabbos is a weighty matter, and I know that because the punishment for Chilul Shabbos is skila, is being stoned. But the muzzling of an animal, which is only a simple lav, well, maybe I don't say that there's a rabbinic prohibition against telling a non-Jew to do it. Maybe it's not that big a deal. I'll do a lashna, or maybe I shouldn't make that distinction. Maybe anything that is forbidden from the Torah, I can't tell a non-Jew to do for me. Tashma, let's prove it. A non-Jew who is using a Jew's cow to thresh, there's no prohibition of baltasam. Miavarhu delavar. So what the language of the brisa is that he's not liable, like he doesn't violate the prohibition. Haisura Haisura Ika, but like we're inferring from the language of the brisa that it's still forbidden. Like you don't violate the Easter Torah, but you're still forbidden by the rabbis to do it. So the Gemara doesn't like that. Really, there's no Isur at all, even Drabana. But I did a ton of Seifa, Yisrael Hadash Nachri over. But since it's in the follow-on, the Mishnah is using the term over when it comes to a Jew who is threshing with a non-Jew's cow. You're over even the Torah prohibition, so it's using that language. Tana Reisha, I know over, so it uses the same language in the Reisha, but we shouldn't derive something so specific from it. And perhaps there still is an Isur Drabanan, or perhaps there is not. Tashma, let's try another proof.
But can he tell the goy? The goy doesn't have to, but can he tell the goy? That's the question here.
That's
right?
The question, yeah. Yeah, that's the question. Can you tell
so is
the
he
guy
allowed
to
to tell the goy not that you to muzzle with them?
Right, that's what we're dealing with. So is it like Shabbos where you can't tell a guy to do something for you that you're forbidden to do? Or is it not as weighty as Shabbos? And even though it's forbidden for you to do it, you can still tell a non-Jew to do it, and the rabbis did not go that far as to forbid you from doing that rabbinically. Yeah.
So that's the answer then, right?
That's the question we're dealing with.
We're still on the question.
We're still on the question. We tried that as an answer and rejected it. So we're going to try again. Tashma, they sent the question to Shmuel's father. Halon Kore, these oxen that we have. The Ganvin Aramai Umeganchin Yason Mau. That these Arameans, the non-Jews, are stealing them and castrating them, which Jews are not allowed to do. So I think that the situation here was that it was a wink, wink, nod, nod kind of thing. The Jews wanted to castrate their bulls, but they weren't allowed to do it. So they kind of tipped off the Arameans saying, you know what, these animals are, I'm going to walk away from my desk for a minute. These animals are here. Here's where they are at night, and nobody's guarding them. Wouldn't it be a shame if somebody came and castrated them? So they set it up. So Shalachlu, he answered, Harama Isavid Behu. If he's asking Harama Isavid Behu, are they trying to skirt the law here? Arimu Alaihu Vizdabnun. So then you, the rabbis, should be creative with them also, and make sure that they're sold. In other words, they should be. It is improper rabbinically for this thing to happen, for you to let non-Jews do what you're not allowed to do. And this is not a kares thing, or this is not a skila thing like Shabbos. So this would indicate that just ordinary prohibitions that you're not allowed to do, you're also not allowed to have a non-Jew do for you, rabbinically. Amarav Papa, b'nei Marava sarvi l'Rav Chidka. We're talking here about B'nai Marava, the people in the West, in Eretz Yisrael. So they're the ones who sent the question. Maybe they hold like Rav Chidka B'Diamar B'nei Noach Mitzuvin Al Aseris, who says that this is not only a problem for Jews to do, actually, it's a problem for non-Jews themselves. So it's not a question of, are you trying to evade your own prohibition by having someone who's allowed to do it? No, according to the Bnei Marava, even the non-Jews are not allowed to castrate the bull because that's one of these Sheva, included in one of the Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach, according to them. The kavre mishum lifnei iver lo tietei mishal. So if you entice them to do this, you're inciting them, or you're misleading them into doing something that is forbidden even for them. And that's why Shmuel's father ruled that it's a rabbinic problem for them to do it. So Rava wanted to know, what does it mean they should be sold? It should be sold to be slaughtered. Amar Abaye, Dayan Shakanasa Lam Mechira. It's enough that you made them sell it. Don't be so difficult that you make them sell it for specifically for shechita, which is presumably a lower price than you could sell them as live animals that could work. I mean, the whole point of castrating them is, I think, so they would work better. Okay, so pshita beno gadol ki acher dame, beno katan mai. So it's obvious that if you have a son who is selling it to your grown son, to your son who's reached the age of majority, who's an adult, that would be okay to sell it to your son, right? As a way to fulfill this penalty. So you're kind of keeping it in the family, but we're not going to be so strict as to say, technically it's okay. You have sold it to somebody else. So that's as far as we're going to go. But what about Beno Katan Mai? What if you sell it to your son who is of minor age? Does that suffice to fulfill this penalty? Rav Achai Asar, Rabbi Yashi Shari. Rav Achai and Rav Ashi had different opinions.
So what's the penalty if he sells it to his older son? It's really the same family. I mean, and they can use it for
Right.
For plowing or whatever it might be. I don't see what the penalty is there.
Right. So it's kind of a technical fulfillment of this penalty, right? As you say, like there's no legal basis to say that you didn't sell it. You really did sell it. Now we're looking the other way. We're not going to impose the penalty so strictly so that you can't keep it in the family this way. As long as you actually have to go through the motions of selling it to even if it's to a family member, the rabbis deemed that sufficient as maybe a deterrent, or maybe as a slap on the wrist, if you will, for doing this. Because remember, they only engaged in the dodge. You only engaged in the dodge in the first place. Technically, you arranged for it to happen in a way that's technically legal. So the rabbis kind of retaliate by making you sell it, but they're going to allow you. I mean, it seems a little, it seems like you're just perpetuating. I see what your point is. I think you're just kind of perpetuating this idea that you can get around things by technically following the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. But I guess we're just kind of saying that, yeah, we can penalize them in kind. Although, from another perspective, it seems like you're kind of validating the whole idea that you can get around the spirit of the law this way. So
Sort of
I accept your.
reminds me of not exactly, but it reminds me of Chirat Chametz.
Uh-huh.
That's a legal fiction. I mean, are you selling it? Are you really selling the chametz?
Right. Well, that's a subject of centuries of jurisprudence, right? Centuries of discussion. I'll tell you a good story though on that. I have a friend who he himself had a friend in the Haredi world who was sending his kids to Beis Yaakov school, And the Beis Yaakov school made you sign a paper saying, I don't have among other things, I don't have a television, right? In order to send your kids to the school. So my friend found that, he says, I'm sending my kid to Beis Yaakov. So my friend says to him, how can you send your kid to Beis Yaakov? You have to sign this thing. You can't. Why? How can you sign that? You have no television. He says, don't be silly. He says, we sold the television to the maid.
Paula actually got a suggestion regarding our cats, that we should sell the cat to a non-Jew, and the non-Jew actually had to be able to feed it hummus and pesach, and the non-Jew would actually have to pick up the cat in order to make a kinyan, which is, it's generally not a good idea to have
to pick up a cat.
pick up a cat that doesn't want to be picked up.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, back to selling to your minor son to fulfill this penalty. So Rav Acher also Rav Ashi Shari, and some say, Meremer and Marzutra, and some say these maybe it was anonymous. It wasn't Meremer and Marzutra. It was two unspecified scholars. They would, if they had this situation, they would exchange with each other, right? So in other words, I'll get my bull castrated, you get yours castrated, and then in order to fulfill the requirement that we sell them, we'll exchange with each other.
That's like changing one shirt before going to the kotel.
Oh, so you don't have to tear it.
Right.
Boy, Rami Barchama. Rami Barchama asks, Hoshiv la kotes b'fi amau. Let's say you don't muzzle your ox, but you put a thorn in its mouth so that it'll be uncomfortable for it to eat. So you're not actually using a muzzle, but you're actively preventing it from eating. Is that a violation? Hoshiv la chasima mal yasahi. So Gemara says, well, that's actually muzzling. Like you're doing an active thing to prevent it from eating. You don't have to use a particular brand name of muzzle to be over the slav. If you do something to prevent it from eating, then that's muzzling. Ella will re-ask the question. Yashav lakotz b'fi amau. What if it independently, it got a thorn in its mouth? You could see it was uncomfortable eating, and you say, you know what, this is a good time to thresh, because it won't want to eat the grain. So is that permitted? Or what if you get a lion to prowl around outside the threshing area, so it will be nervous and won't want to eat? Is that okay? Actually, want to ask the same question. That's actual, taking an action to keep it from eating. That's muzzling. Ella. Let's ask the question, what if there happened to be a lion outside the threshing area and you're like, this is a good time to put the animal to work because it'll be scared and it won't want to eat? Is that permitted or not? Also, Hamid Benami Bachutzmao, what if you take the animal's calf and put it outside so it's aware of its presence and it won't want to eat? Or if it was thirsty, so it wouldn't want to eat. Parasla Katavalia Algabe Dishamahu, or if you not sure what this is, it's like spreading a boiled hide on top of the produce. Is that considered muzzling? So Pasha Miachada, one of these we can answer. Tanya. Rashai Bal Parla Harif Paraso Kadesha Tochal Min Adisha Harbe. You can starve the ox in advance so that it eats a lot of the produce that you're threshing. So in other words, a situation where you might want the cow to eat a lot is to starve it beforehand. Let's say that you're using your animal to thresh somebody else's grain, right? So you're like, okay, well, I won't feed my animal today because I know it's going to thresh in the afternoon. I'll let it eat my neighbor's grain, right? So that is permitted. V'rashai balabais lahatir pekia amir lifnei behema kadei shelo tochel min adisha harbe. And the owner of the produce in this case can untie some hay in front of the animal, let it eat some hay, rather than eat my valuable grain, right? So so this latter case where you spread hay over the wheat, so that it'll eat the hay and not the wheat, that seems to be the same as putting a blanket over the wheat. The Gemara says no, it's not the same thing. Shani hasam dekachla. No, you're letting the animal eat, right? When you cover the food, you're not allowing it to eat at all. When you substitute or when you make available another kind of food, you're kind of tricking the animal, but at least you're letting it eat. So that's not a good proof. Or you could answer, you can you're feeding it, or you could answer that when you're feeding it the hay, it's not like you don't even have to rely on the fact that you're offering it a choice. No, you could say you're allowed to feed it hay before it starts working so that it won't be hungry and won't eat your produce. Okay, so we don't have an answer to any of these things. Well, let's just ask another question instead. Rabbi Yonasan, Rabbi Simai. Rabbi Yonasan asked Rabbi Simai, what if you muzzle it before you bring it into the threshing house? Is that considered threshing it, or is the
Muzzle
Easter technically that you can't muzzle it in the place that it's threshing? So let's investigate. Shor b'disha, lo tachsom shor b'disha, amar Rachmanav halav b'disha. Should we be specific about understanding the language of the Torah? You can't muzzle an ox in its threshing, meaning on the spot, like in the place where it's threshing. Maybe the Torah just means like you can't thresh with it while it's muzzled. You can't muzzle it at any time. On the low, you can learn from your father. What does it mean from Mivei Savicha? Your father was a Kohen, and Yain v'Sheichar, so you're a Kohen. Yain v'Sheichar Teishtatol Lanecha Itach Bevachem. You have the same kind of language. Don't it's given to the Kohanim. Don't drink wine or intoxicating liquor when you come in to the temple, right, to the Mishkan. So b'vachem hudasar hamishta umeal shari doesn't mean that. Would you say that it means you can't just drink wine in the Mishkan? No, obviously it means you can't drink wine and be drunk when you come into the Mishkan. Because the Torah says you have to distinguish between being holy and being not holy. So like, don't be silly, right? Like if the command is not to drink when you're doing the avodah, it means don't do it drunk. Here too, with the muzzling, this means the same kind of thing. In other words, don't muzzle your ox at any time if it's going to be muzzled when you thresh with it. We have a supporting brisa. If you muzzle a cow but you don't thresh with it, or you put together, you're not allowed to put two species of animal together in the same yoke. So let's say you put the yoke on them but you don't work them, then potter, you're not liable. The what incurs the penalty of lashes is when you actually thresh or you actually have them work with the yoke. So this supports the idea that it's not strictly the act of putting on the muzzle; it's the muzzling while they're muzzling them so that they'll be muzzled while they thresh. So same thing applies there. Okay, I think this is a good place to break for the day.
one can muzzle the animal. It's
you can muzzle an animal. You just can't make it work after you've muzzled.
Can't make it work. So if one's walking down the street with the animal, so it doesn't attack another animal and doesn't bite someone, that would be permissible.
Correct.
Have a short muad, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Have a good day, everybody.
Okay.